Hello friends, and welcome again to a Walk in the Garden Bible study. This is part 3 in our study of Genesis chapter 20. And if you remember from our last lesson, we were looking at Abraham and his family. They had moved down south, they went down into the land of the Philistines, and we saw there the king at that time was this man named Abimelech. And so anyway, we saw where Abraham had found himself in a predicament. You know, Sarah had been taken into the king's household because Abraham had related that she was his sister and not his wife. And so we discussed that to some extent, the circumstances that led up to that decision. And, you know, as a result, he found himself in this predicament now that the king had taken Sarah into his household. And so certainly Abraham was concerned about the situation and trying to figure a way out of this. And he was concerned about his safety, about his life, and certainly about Sarah and her predicament and her honor as well. And so they were just trying to figure out what to do. And then we saw where the Lord had intervened on his behalf to Abimelech in a dream by night. He came to him in a dream and basically just pointed the finger at him and said, "Thou art but a dead man," and went on to explain the fact that, you know, he had taken a man's wife. And then in the dream, Abimelech pleaded his case before the Lord. We saw where he recognized him for who he was, that he was the Lord of hosts. And he pleaded his case because he said he did it with the integrity of his heart. He did it in all innocence and all the fact that he was not privy to this. He had been deceived into thinking that she was unattached and that she was available and that she was the man's sister. And the Lord recognized that. He said, "Yes, I know you did this in the integrity of your heart, but here's what I want you to do. I want you to make it right. I want you to restore Sarah to her husband. And if you do that, then all will be well. If you do that, then Abraham will pray for you, will pray on your behalf and ask me to intervene and to make all things well, and you will live. But if you don't, then you're going to die, as well as all of your kinfolk and your household will perish as well." And so with that, we're going to pick it up in verses 8 through 13. So that's where we find this situation right now. And here we see the result. It says, "Therefore Abimelech rose early in the morning and called all of his servants and told all these things in their ears. And the men were sore afraid. Then Abimelech called Abraham and said unto him, What hast thou done unto us? And what have I offended thee, that thou hast brought on me and on my kingdom a great sin? And Abimelech said unto Abraham, What sawest thou that thou hast done this thing? And Abraham said, Because I thought, surely the fear of God is not in this place, and they will slay me for my wife's sake. And yet indeed she is my sister. She is the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother. And she became my wife. And it came to pass, when God caused me to wander from my father's house, that I said unto her, This is thy kindness which thou shalt show unto me. At every place whither we shall come, say of me, He is my brother." And so here we see the encounter now between Abraham and Abimelech. But what do we notice first of all? Well, first of all, we notice the reaction of Abimelech to the warning of God that he received via the dream. You know, he's been warned of being involved in sinful activity and unseemly activity, and of sin and its consequences. And thusly, you know, I'm sure he didn't sleep a wink after that. I mean, I'm sure that was disturbing him all night long. And what does it say? It says he rose early in the morning. He didn't want to tarry. He didn't want to have breakfast first. He didn't want to, put it off one moment longer. As soon as the sun was up, as soon as the light hit the window, he was up, dressed, and out and about. And what does he do first? Well, he sees first, he calls and gathers all of his family and all of his servants together and rehearses these matters now before them. Because, he realizes that judgment, or the possibility of judgment and repercussion, is looming over him. I mean, God has given him a stark warning. He knows that this thing is real, it's imminent, and as we talked about last time, he's remembering the events that took place in Sodom. And he knows about this Abraham. He knows about his nephew Lot. He knows about the events that took place, and that their God came down and pronounced judgment and literally wiped cities off the face of the planet. I mean, there was nothing left behind. I mean, there was no lingerings behind. There was no evidences behind. There was no, rubble. There was nothing. They were just simply leveled off the face of the earth. And so he senses that this could be the very thing that's impending, this impending doom that's upon him and his family because of encountering this encounter now that he has with this Abraham. And so what does he do first? Well, before he even asked for Abraham to come, he calls all of his family and all of his servants. And he tells them about his dream. And he tells them about the situation, that sin has now come into the camp. And now he is determined to ensure that his family and his servants are made aware of exactly, what the details are. I mean, let's face it, if you're in a situation where there's trouble on the horizon, maybe there's an imminent storm coming, or maybe there's some kind of danger that you found out is coming your way. Maybe you're in a situation where the enemy is coming, and you heard that they're coming to your town, or coming to your land, or coming to your environment, your territory, and that they're on their way, and there's danger. Well, what are you going to do? Well, certainly you want everybody to know about it, know about what's going on, and know about what the situation is. And they were all to be included, because if these things don't work out, it's not going to be just him, but it's going to be his entire family that's going to be wiped out. And so what do we see the reaction to his speech is? Well, it says the men, after hearing these things, it says they were sore afraid. I mean, they were trembling in their boots. They didn't know what to do. How can you fight an unseen force? How can you, rectify something that you can't tangibly touch or maneuver with or negotiate with? And, so it's really up to their king. It's really up to Abimelech to handle this situation. And so next we see that we have Abimelech's reproof upon Abraham. He calls Abraham to come into his house. And what does he say? He says, "What hast thou done unto us?" What have I done to offend thee, Abraham, to bring this thing upon us? You came in here, you came down in our land, you wanted to sojourn a while here, you're immigrants, and then, we asked about the woman we encountered, and we asked about her, and we were told that she was unattached. We were told that she was just your sister. There was no indication that she was anybody's wife. And I didn't do anything wrong, basically. I took her in all with the pure integrity of my heart, with pure intentions, trying to do things the right way. And because of your deception, because of your not revealing the truth to us, now I find myself and my kingdom in this situation, that we're being threatened because of something that basically you did. It's your fault. What have you done unto us? Why have you done this thing? What did I do to you that offended you to bring this danger upon us? Why have you brought sin into our camp, Abraham? Why have you instigated this crime that could have resulted in me committing the grave sin of adultery? And what have I done against you that would bring about such a thing? Have I offended you greatly in some form or fashion that I'm not aware of? Have I done something that you wanted to get back at me and bring judgment upon me? Have I done something that I'm unaware of, that just undercut you somehow? I mean, what is it? What have I done? Have I done you greatly that you would seek to bring such a great sin upon us, that the judgment of God Almighty would fall upon us? And so we see here that even Abimelech recognizes the sin of adultery as a great sin. What does he say? He says that you would seek to bring a great sin upon us. And it's just a really sad case that once what was considered a great sin, in fact, it's such a great sin that it's one of the 10 commandments that God gave to Moses on the Mount. It's one of the very important things, because it's an attack upon one of God's very first institutions, and that was the institution of marriage. When he first formulated Eve and took her out of the man, and Adam named her woman because she was taken out of man, and he said that now two, you'll no longer be two, but when you come together, you become one flesh. That was the first institution of marriage, and that's a sacred event. That's an ordinance of God, and that was ordained by God, and it is a holy thing before God, the institution of marriage and the family unit. And it's just really a sad case that through the years, through the centuries, it's always been recognized as such. And adultery and fornication were always looked down upon greatly. And in many cases, they were dealt with severely because they were recognized as a great sin and an offense to a holy God. And that's what it was. And that's what it still is. Nothing has changed. It's still an offense to a holy God. And it's just a sad state of affairs when many in our society today, they receive the concept of adultery with such an indifferent attitude or a nonchalant, cavalier disposition about the matter. What am I saying? Well, it's just taken lightly. Nobody frowns on it anymore. Nobody looks down upon it. It's become such a normal facet in our society that it's almost laughed about or joked about, or people think that they're just no matters wrong with it whatsoever. There's nothing to be concerned about when it happens. And that's why we see today at the rate of the things that are going on with adultery and fornication, the rate of divorces are at an all-time high. The rate of single parent or children being born out of wedlock is at an all-time high. Abortions and things of that nature, the result of illicit relationships, are at an all-time high. Well, why is that? Well, it's because people have gotten away from the word of the Lord. They no longer recognize it as the word of the Lord. They no longer think that it's a great sin. They just don't. They don't even think it's a sin, period. Or if they do, they don't want to think about it because they want to have pleasure in what they're doing. They think that they know what's best. They know what they can do, and basically just thumbing their nose at God. But it never ends well. It results in many, many negative things. And ultimately, they're going to have to account for that before a holy God. And so, how's Abimelech been viewing this? How's he been thinking about this and contemplating in his own mind? Well, he looks upon it that not just he would be in danger, but his entire household and kingdom would now be threatened as a result. Again, thinking that maybe the judgment of God is just going to completely obliterate the entire population of his kingdom. He had definitely heard about the escapades and the dismal results and the outcome of Sodom and Gomorrah, and now could only imagine that they could very well experience the same calamity and have the same outcome. Not good. Not good. And he's furious at Abraham. He's angry, and rightfully so. And, this is the first thing in the morning. I mean, before anybody had their cup of coffee or whatever they drank in the morning, a cup of tea, before they got up and had any kind of, family gatherings at the breakfast table or whatever. I mean, it was, they could have, maybe Abraham was still in his night clothes or whatever. I mean, I don't know, but he got him there first thing. He had to get this thing settled, get this thing out in the open. And so notice Abimelech's line of questioning towards Abraham. What do we see? First he says, "What hast thou done unto us?" Secondly, "What have I offended thee, that thou hast brought on me and on my kingdom a great sin?" And thirdly, "What sawest thou that thou hast done this thing?" What reason, Abraham, would you think that if we had known her to be your wife, that thou wouldst have been exposed to any danger by it? I mean, what caused you to think that way? What did you see? Did you see something that indicated that to you? Did you hear about something in my city here that indicated that that would happen? Or were you just speculating and surmising? Because what did you say? You said, You thought surely the fear of God wasn't in this place. So you think that we don't have any kind of scruples? You don't think that we have any kind of morals or any kind of standards just because the fear of your God may not be in this place? And so that's what we see. We see, he says, what influenced you to make such an assumption? And so Abraham gives him his response. He says, because I thought, surely the fear of God is not in this place, and that they will slay me for my wife's sake. Abraham had heard the rumors, but you know how rumors are. I mean, things can get blown out of proportion. Hearsay, people can say, well, I heard over in Abimelech's kingdom that this is what happened. This is what's going to happen. And, you think back to the world wars or even any kind of wars, and there's all kinds of rumors that fly about the enemy. And, a lot of people in these different occupied zones, when they knew the enemy was coming in, well, they'd heard all this propaganda, and they thought they were going to be, that these, especially the Americans, they thought they were going to be beheaded, they thought they were going to be tortured, they thought they were going to, the civilians were thinking these things because that's what they had been told by their governments would happen if they were invaded by the enemy. And it was farther from the truth. And when the Americans came in most cases they were supplying them with food, they were supplying them with shelter, they were trying to give them safety, and they brought good things, but they had been told otherwise. And so they'd taken in all of these propaganda, these rumors, and because of that they had a false impression. And so that's what we see here is Abraham had a false impression, evidently, of this territory. And he had been under the influence of whoever had told him or taught him or given him some information, the hearsay. And so he said that I heard that I would be killed for my wife's sake. And he suspected that if there was no reverence of God here, which he'd also heard of, then there would definitely be no scruples concerning them taking his wife by force. And as a result, would slay him dead. And of course, as we talked about in one of the previous chapters, we saw where the same exact thing had taken place in Egypt. And again, Abraham had this line of thinking and did the same exact function, and the same outcome was taking place. He had the same result. And so then he goes on to clear himself of the guilt. What does he say? He says, and yet indeed, she is my sister Abimelech, so I didn't really flat out lie to you. I didn't tell 100% fib. I mean, yeah, maybe there was a little deception involved there because I didn't reveal who her true identity was. But I didn't, flat out lie either because technically she is my sister, even though it's a half-sister. Because she's the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother. And as a result of that, she became my wife. So not an outright lie. And Abimelech, it wasn't only directed against you, but this has been a matter of practice everywhere we go. I told her that everywhere we travel to, that, what does he say? He says, ever since we left my father's house, this has been going on. So it wasn't directed just towards you. It wasn't directed at, to bring in the intent. There was no underlying intent of bringing danger upon you, bringing judgment upon you. I wasn't doing it for that reason. But this is just commonplace with us, that this is what we decided to do to try to provide safety for our family. And ever since I left my father's house, this has been going on, that she's been claiming the same thing, telling the same story, and it's happened everywhere we've traveled. We have an agreement, Abimelech, between me and her that this is what we're going to do. When God caused me to wander from my father's house, this is when the matter was settled and how we would conduct ourselves, that her identity would effectively be changed and no longer be known as my wife, but as my sister. And so it would seem that after this and the former incidents and missteps, that maybe Abraham would rethink and recalculate. At least the second time this has happened, and that maybe he would no longer honor that agreement that he took between him and his wife. And so that's what we would hope so. But with that, it brings us into verses 14 through 18. And here the Bible says, and Abimelech took sheep and oxen and men servants and women servants and gave them unto Abraham. and restored him Sarah his wife. And Abimelech said, Behold, my land is before thee, dwell where it pleaseth thee. And unto Sarah he said, Behold, I have given thy brother 1,000 pieces of silver. Behold, he to thee a covering of the eyes, unto all that are with thee, and with all other. Thus she was reproved. So Abraham prayed unto God, and God healed Abimelech and his wife and his maidservants, and they bare children. For the Lord had fast closed up all the wombs of the house of Abimelech, because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. And so we see that Abimelech now is going to follow through on what the Lord had commanded him to do. The Lord had given him an out. We talked about that last time, that the Lord always provides a way of salvation, but it's got to be by his method, whether it's our spiritual salvation, a physical salvation, or getting out of a situation. He provides a way of escape, but it has to be through, his directions. And so he gave Abimelech directions on what to do. Restore Abraham, his wife. And then if you do that, then he's going to pray on your behalf. He's going to pray unto me and request unto me, and then I'm going to heal your land and restore you. And so we see here where Abimelech follows through. What does it say? It says, it says, unto Sarah he said, Behold, I've given you 1,000. But anyway, it says that he restored Sarah to Abraham. And so we're made aware now, he goes a step further. We're made aware of the kindness that King Abimelech would now bestow upon Abraham and his entourage. He will send them out literally with a high hand. And Abimelech has been rebuked by the Lord and takes it with all gravity. He doesn't take it lightly. He wants to make sure that Abraham is going to follow through and pray for him and his family. He wants to treat the Lord's prophet correctly. And after he openly displayed to Abraham that it was he that brought this guilt and dishonor upon him, that he would now seek to make amends and encourage Abraham to pray for his God, for him and his nation. And it kind of reminds us of the Bible verse that tells us, gives us basically the same type of command. That says that if we'll humble ourselves and pray, and I'm paraphrasing here because I didn't have the verse written down, but and seek his face and diligently pray to God on behalf of the nation, then it says that and turn from their wicked ways, and that he will heal their land. He'll hear their prayer and heal their land. And it's coming to God through his method, through his means, but it's requesting his favor on behalf of the people. That's what it is. And so, God didn't instruct Abimelech to give him all of these possessions and give him all of these riches and these animals and servants, and just give him a high hand by enriching him like he did. But he felt obligated to do that, and there's a couple of reasons. First of all, what do we see? He says he gave him some of all he had. He gave him sheep, oxen, men servants, women servants. These were all valuable commodities to Abimelech. These were all valuable commodities to any king. And they didn't let them go lightly. They didn't just give them to anybody at any time, because they were valuable possessions. But more importantly, he obeyed the Lord's command, because it says here that he restored him Sarah, his wife. And that's what God had instructed him to do. Secondly, we see that he gives him some of his greatest possessions, and that of the land. What does he say? He says, Behold, my land is before thee, dwell where it pleaseth thee. Take a look around, Abraham. Survey it from one end to the other. You find a good spot that you feel comfortable in, and it's yours. You can stay there as long as you like. Just pick out whatever it is that pleaseth thee, and I'm good with it. I'll sign the deed over to you. Any parcel he chooses will now be available to him, and for as long as he desires. And then thirdly, he relates to Sarah. He says that the fact that he has given her brother 1,000 pieces of silver. And this was done either for the satisfaction, for the fact that he had taken her into his house, or more or less as kind of as a restitution. Because under Old Testament law, when restitution was made, it was made with increase or with interest, and more was added to it. Or, as we said, it was done just in an effort to encourage Abraham to make sure he didn't forget to pray for him on his behalf, and to appease him in an effort to make sure he did that. Now, I wouldn't doubt that he probably said, hey, Abraham, I'm giving you all these things now, that you won't forget about me, will you? You won't forget to pray to your God for me, will you? I mean, when you get home or get back and get comfortable, don't forget, don't get so caught up in all the things that have happened that you forget about that. Leviticus chapter 6 and verses 4 through 5, the Bible says, Then it shall be, because he hath sinned and is guilty, that he shall restore that which he took violently away, or the thing which he hath deceitfully gotten, or that which was delivered him to keep, or the lost thing which he hath found, or all that about which he hath sworn falsely. He shall even restore it in the principal, and shall add the fifth part more thereto, and give it unto him to whom it appertaineth, in the day of his trespass offering. So there's in Leviticus, eventually that's going to be one of the lawful things to do. And so this is kind of a precedent, you might say, being set even before that time. And so we see that Abimelech restores his wife and then showers him. You might want to say showers with blessings, because it is a blessing from God. And we saw the similar situation in Egypt when Pharaoh sent him on his way, but he showered him with possessions, showered him with riches. And, it's just in an effort to send him off well, but also to hopefully, secure the blessings of God that they'll be restored. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in our next lesson, how, one of the judgments that was already taking place on him and on his family, even during this time, and the fact that that would be lifted by God once everything is secured and is well in his sight. So we'll talk about that in our next lesson, and we'll pick it up here in the remaining verses of 8 through 14 there, and we'll hope to see you next time. Thanks.